Welcome back, guys, to episode 3 of the Meta Matters podcast, the only podcast focusing on performance and coaching in esports. My name is Tyler Bond, and I'll be your host today. And I'm here with the wonderful Matt Watson, my wonderful co-host. And this week is a really exciting week. We are going to be talking to a very exciting guest, lead performance coach for Rogue, Ismael Pedraza. How you doing, Isma? You all right?
Hi, guys. Yes, thank you for the invitation.
Good.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming on today, dude. It's really exciting. So, it's probably a good place for you to maybe introduce yourself to people who may not know exactly what it is that you do.
Yeah, well, at the moment, my name is Ismael Pedraza. I come from Colombia. I just around the world of esports, but more specifically based in Europe, in Berlin, working as a performance coach for the LEC team Rogue Esports. So, yes. So, at the same time, I'm doing my PhD at the German Sport University in Cologne, as well, working all around performance psychology, just more from the research perspective. So I'm sort of doing a little bit of research, a little bit of apply. I would say a lot from both sides, but yes, that's very briefly what I'm doing. I mean, like we can go into detail for each of those sections, but yes.
Absolutely, that's fantastic, dude. So I'd really like to maybe, and you've probably had this question 100 times now, right? I mean, you've spoken to a lot of podcasts and been in a ton of interviews, but it's a really good spot to start to get context. So I'd really like, if you're happy to talk about it, to start off at the start, really. If you could maybe talk about how you got involved in esports to start with.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good place to start. Well, I was doing my master's degree in sports psychology at the University of Jyväskylä in Finland. That was in 2016 when a colleague of us, lecturer at the moment, Weldon Green, he just came with this this information about like he was working with an esports team. At the moment, I think he was working with G2, and then like he introduced this idea about yes, you can apply sports psychology to esports. So we were a little bit like, what is esports? What's this about? So that was the first the first hint for me to start thinking, well, there are other domains out there, performance domains, that we can start integrating what we do in the world of performance psychology into performance, basically into other domains. So that's how everything started. Like from there, when I was finishing my degree, my master's degree, with some colleagues, we just created a website related to, everything started in the way that we would like to do a blog website type of thing, just to educate people about what sports psychology is, how can you benefit in the world of normal traditional sports, right? So everything was directed towards getting that experience in the applied field. But then at the same time, I still had that idea about esports. So I can say I struggle a little bit into accepting that esports could be something similar as sports. This was in 2016, but after thinking a lot, I just decided to go all into esports with my colleagues, and we just created this website. And after we created this website, we just got contacted by Misfits Gaming in 2017. So I think the website took like only 2 weeks or 3 weeks to resonate in social media, and just that's how basically I started. So I started with Misfits Gaming as performance coach.
Dude, that's crazy how it went from 2 weeks as well. So I mean, what was your background in before that? Did you have any experience playing esports titles, or was it purely look, this is a really interesting application for a skill that I've learned through academia, let's try something new?
Yeah, it was basically like I had no idea about esports. So like I said, 2016 I started learning a little bit what was this about, and I started watching a lot of the LCS, EU LCS at the moment. Mm-hmm. And then it was just more like watching YouTube videos, and of course, because I come from traditional sports, I played my whole life soccer, football, and it was that was my main thing. And then coming from these high contact sports into just sitting down and just play a video game, professionally was a big change. So I knew I had to learn because I had experience working as performance coach or experience sports psychology applied to different sports, but not really into esports. So it was more like for me a learning process. And when I started in Misfits, it was as well like that. I was learning a lot. I was just kind of sitting back and then just try to learn, try to soak so much information from that environment, basically.
Dude, that's really interesting. So you obviously mentioned Weldon Green then as well, right? So
Yeah.
for a bit of context for people who may not know who that is as well, Weldon and Isma now, you guys are two of the most prominent performance coaches in esports, right? And you're probably two of the first. I think, I know that you would argue Weldon came before you as well, but a lot of people, their first interaction with an esports coach and a performance coach has been you. And I think that's a really interesting journey that you've come on from not even necessarily knowing about esports, not even accepting it as a sport, as many people struggle with nowadays, to being, the performance coach for one of the best teams in the world now, right? And I think that's a really interesting point to maybe talk about is, do you remember the point that you realized the impact you could have as a performance coach for an esports team specifically? Or is it more a case of, look, I went to a team, I started sitting back learning, I didn't know about esports, but then I started realizing the impact I could have? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's an interesting question. I mean, like that moment, right? That moment that clicks. I mean, like for sure, it was making so much sense with the time that what we do in traditional sports and the knowledge or the education that we were getting or that I was getting at that moment could have or was something that could be very well used in esports. But I think the moment that I realized, well, it makes sense. It was probably when I finished my work with Misfits, so a year and a half after. When I had this break, I had like 6 months break between in 2000. What was this, like 18? Yeah, like at the end of 2018, I had a little break, and it was a really good break to try to reflect on my work with Misfits and what should I do different and how I approach this first experience, because definitely we could say that sports psychology, performance psychology, sports science, it's very beneficial to these guys in esports. But then at the same time, I try to figure like how we can actually apply it, because for sure the knowledge is out there, but the difference is how it is executed, the knowledge that you have. And then for me, I was getting more and more positive feedback in the sense that you are applying something with a player and the player is reacting positively, but then you are doing something different with someone else and you don't get the same reaction to it. So you're still like doubting, like, okay, so does it actually make sense what I'm doing? Because at the time there was not much information or knowledge that you could take from. So I was a little bit more like blind in the sense that, okay, I'm trying to apply some concepts from traditional sports and see if they work. Like Weldon Green was one of the first ones. He was doing lots of podcasts. He was very into social media. So you can get some experience from him. But then at the same time, when you are in the real world, working with the players, working in the gaming house or in the office space is just a completely different adventure. So it was with the time, but then that I would say this point was in between Misfits and Rogue.
That's super interesting, dude. So you spoke about execution then, right? So I think one of the points that me and Matt have spoken about over the last couple of weeks of podcasts is the short-term nature of esports and the sort of transient nature that teams exist in, right? A lot of teams may only exist together for a split. And I know one of the issues that me and Matt have spoken about a lot, and Matt, jump in here, dude, but one of the issues that we've sort of seen raised a couple of times, is the fact that sometimes as a performance coach or a sports psychologist or as a support team for an esports team, you don't really have time to execute your skill set in a way that is that would like benefit the team the most, purely because these teams don't exist sometimes for more than a split. Is that the case for you? Have you seen, you know, that short-term nature of esports being an issue or not?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this point as well at some point on my Twitter account, and it was that many of the orgs are just focusing on trying to win right now, trying to get the most benefits from the investment that they are having on a specific roster right now, which I understand, because this is like in other traditional sports, you know, at the high level of performance, that okay, just 3, 4, 5 weeks, if your team is not winning, well, what do? Coaches are the first ones to you know, be to blame, right? So I think it is part of a high performance environment, but at the same time, some organizations might be forgetting that esports is new. It's a new place, and you need to give some time to the players, to the coaches, to understand the role where they are in, to understand what they are supposed to be doing, and to try to understand how they could have a positive effect on their players. So I think it comes a lot in terms of the knowledge that maybe the supporting staff or the management staff have, and how they are approaching their organization. So we are seeing good examples, but there are other examples that you can tell that they are creating the roster just based on, we want to win now, because there are sponsors, there are investors that really require to, okay, give me the money back. So you can understand it, but then at the same time, we need to try to balance this situation.
Mm-hmm. So I will come in. I'll contribute something to this podcast. Something was going through my head as you guys were talking. It was like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I realized I'm in the right room, I think. So,
Nice.
Yeah, Isma, I guess when it comes to sort of development and like long-term development, this is no joke. I was talking to someone earlier this week, and I mentioned that we were going to be talking to you, and they said they described you as esports royalty, and that's not a fake quote. That was true from a colleague in esports in the UK, and that's because you've done such good work in sort of an applied way. So with teams that you've been involved in at a high level with players, and also in research, and you were the lead author on a big paper looking at the sort of cognitive effects and game performance effects of esports. And one of the things that I picked up in there was players that are friends and play together longer seem to have a higher level of sort of game performance. So are you conscious of that in your work? Do you sort of, when you're working with a team, do you sort of try and form bonds between players, and then knowing that you might not have long to work with players sort of over 2-3 years, is that sort of first and foremost to try and get people together and enjoying each other's company, and then hopefully game performance comes from that? Or is there another approach?
Matt, by the way, nice jersey.
Okay.
Fanboy all day.
And then I don't think I can cope with that many compliments, guys. Come on.
Honesty.
It is still not well deserved, not yet. No, I think this is very interesting, because one of my reflections after Misfits was about this idea of where my principles or my core, characteristics around the program that I developed with the guys was at the time. So I think that I've been learning about the importance of relationships, and I've been learning around these principles that these players are human beings and they need to be treated in the same way. So we go to more like the basic needs, right? Like we need to try to be related to each other. And these guys are in such a high pressure environment that relationships are just everything, because you need the support of each other. So I would say, yes, my approach, especially right now with Rogue, it's all around relationships. So how are we interacting with each other? And I think it comes from a perspective of the nature of esports. I feel that esports as an industry, or video games as an industry, and even society as how we see it right now, it's quite toxic. It's a very, there is too much hate around, I would say, the society right now. um, and I think like you get a little bit of this, like you get a splash from sometimes from negativity, or from people just trying to show how better they are, and how bad you are, things like that. So I think that's why I've been trying to bring a culture where we respect each other, we tolerate where we come from, and we just learn from each other. It is not easy, because at the same time we're talking about these teenagers, right? Like, we would say like they're still young people, and even sometimes I'm already, what, 31, I think, and I'm still learning. I'm still trying to understand how I behave, understand my personality, understand how I cope with the specific things. So I can imagine these young kids, these young adults, trying to receive feedback, how to give feedback, how to interact with each other. At the same time, they are expected to perform at their best, even though they are not at their highest peak. Um, and I think relationships is something that you can just fall and try to get that intimacy in terms of like, hey, how are you doing, right?
Mhm.
It's interesting. um, I think a few months ago I was just I think I was asking one of the coaches like, hey, how are you doing? And then sometimes you're expecting that I need something from them, right? And then like it was more or less like this situation of like, oh, usually in esports, like people are not that, like really asking how are you doing. They tell you, they ask how are you doing, but then like, how are you doing? Hey, by the way, I need this, or can you do this for me, or stuff like that. So sometimes when you get in this genuine conversation with the people that you are around, you gain this trust, and you gain this like, to develop this safe space, I will say.
Mhm. Is that so? That sounds like in a space where performance is really sort of demanded. That must take up a lot of sort of conscious effort to go in and be around players and sort of, I suppose, more your role than the head coach role. Perhaps, I'm not sure, but maybe your role is more to sort of take the emphasis off those outcomes and sort of performance. And we said in the previous podcast, focusing on the process of performance. But that must take up a lot of planning and conscious effort from you on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely. And this is again just the experience that I've been gaining. Like for example, my approach in Misfits was more about goals. It was more about like, yes, let's set up very specific goals. Like, let's go in the traditional way of using a smart approach, and then using short, mid, long-term goals, and then as well develop values. But then I was giving the same weight to it, and I get to understand. And this is a lot the work that is being done in Denmark or Scandinavian countries around like high performance environments, right? And or this holistic ecological approach that we've been talking a lot about. And they are moving away more from the goals that you set up towards just being value driven.
Mhm.
And this is as well what I start doing a lot, like during the last since this year. And then I just move away from this focus in terms of the goals, because at the same time, everyone knows that we want to go to worlds. Everyone know that we want to win. So you don't need to tell them you must win, or we need to win next week, or let's win, guys. Like everyone knows it. You don't need to tell them, right? You are just generating more expectations. You are just generating more pressure. But then rather let's go a step back and then just focusing on like these values that we set up at the beginning, that we've been reinforcing every week, every 2 weeks, and then like, okay, how are we supposed to be behaving? If we behave in this way, we try to think in this way, we will achieve what we want to achieve, which everyone knows what we want to achieve. So it's been more around this idea of like, yes, like you're saying, this process, but then more the process of how you behave day to day.
Mhm.
Yeah, dude, that's really interesting. Actually, I know you said obviously about this is the kind of world that we're in right now with like social media, and everyone wants to sort of show their best montages and best Twitch like plays and that sort of stuff, right? And that's the same with Instagram. Same with people who only ever show the highlights of their life and stuff, right? And I know last week we were talking to Callum Abbott, so that was a whole podcast about imposter like syndrome, right? And how sometimes if you're not maybe or if you are doing really well, maybe you don't feel like you deserve it, and how that sort of comes back to social media and how people live their sort of lives online now, right? I know that's a really deep topic, but I know I've listened to a podcast where you previously said that you would prefer the like teams you're working with not to use like social media purely because that lets them perform more, right? But esports is so intrinsically tied now with this sort of online world. Esports has grown up on Instagram, on Twitter, on Twitch, right? It's almost impossible to separate a player from Twitter or Instagram, right? And I think going back to your point about how young some of these guys are as well, they age out of esports so early now. This isn't a sport or a profession that you can keep up into your 30s most of the time, right? Some of the oldest like professionals right now, like Doublelift, maybe he's what, 26, 27? That's old for esports, right? He should be retiring, man. It's really tough for, I think, young people to separate themselves from social media, full stop. But I think especially under the like pretense of they are going to have to retire in a few years, right? And the only way that they can keep in esports is by being involved in social media and that sort of stuff. Is that something you've seen? Are you kind of more trying to push people to come off social media and stuff because of the impact it has for them, or not?
I mean, I think we have different issues here, and I will say that social media it's fulfilling different roles, right? So you definitely in esports need a social media I don't know, like identity in order to get people know you, right? And it was even for me the same. I was like, before I started in esports, I was going in the direction like, I don't want to be in social media. I was sometimes, like deleting my Facebook profile, and I didn't want to be involved in this stereotypical or external type of identities profile and this idea of how society should be. But then I started in esports, and then it was like, well, it's necessary for you to get a job. Basically, you need to be out there, and that's I think it it goes in both directions. It could be very positive for you because you could get lots of support, but as well you could be hated by whatever you are doing. Right now, at the pro league, at the pro scene, that is the issue with LS, a caster from the Korean scene, who was going to become the coach of SKT in Korea, and then I don't know, there were lots of issues, and then as well like the fans from SKT they want him, and there were lots of negative messages to him, and he just deleted his or turned off his social media accounts. So I think it goes in both directions. So definitely I come more into the direction like we need to know how to use it, right? Like I wouldn't say to my players that don't use social media, because it's going against what it is asked from investors, organizations. We can see on YouTubers or Instagrammers, the more people you have, the more people are following you, the better, the better brand you are going to have, and the better opportunities you are going to have. So it is more around like, how do you use it? Because as well, like it comes to the point that how much are we protecting our players from these external factors or external pressure when they have to compete in a very kind of stressful environment. So how much are we protecting them? So it's more rather to teach them how to see the world, how to see into perspective, when to use it, when not to use it. But at the moment, I think we're still in the infancy, if you can say, in terms of understanding how to use these platforms.
Actually, really good point. But while you're saying that, I know you a little personally, and you're a very open and passionate person. So I'm not surprised that you've got to where you are, but also I can see through your sort of social media engagement that you're really passionate about what you do, and so it's kind of authentic, right? Your online presence to me is very authentic, very professional, passionate person. I also remember from a previous podcast that I listened that you were on, you mentioned how esports sometimes it can be the case. You could describe it as that esports borrows about 80% of what it does from traditional sports, and you said that there was about 10% of what we do is informed by esports, maybe esports specific research or current practices, and 10% is sort of experimentation in a way, so figuring out how to do things the right way. And I think that what you've been doing over the course of your time at Rogue, it seems to me like things are going very well now, and I wondered how much of that is just your willingness to try new things and be sort of authentic about your intentions with it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel at this point, reflecting on what I've been doing, it's a lot of experimentation, rather than really trying to transfer things from traditional sports. Like, for sure, I use many methods, and most of my methods are they are like based on science, based on you know, based on on places where they have been tested to help in different ways. But then at the same time, it is a lot of experimentation, because you cannot really apply something that is used with soccer players into 5 esport guys, where it is a completely different environment. So I would say there is a lot of experimentation, and for sure I would say that something that has helped me a lot has been my experience in terms of the places that I have been. So, like you were saying about being genuine, I think that's a very, very crucial point in terms of how do you behave with your players, or how you are as a coach. Because for sure, like, we can tell when someone is not genuine, and if we can show, we can see it. So players are going to see it as well, and then that will affect your relationship. And in terms of you, like in my position, performance coach, many of the things outside of the game, so you need to really try to gain that trust, and it's not always easy. So I would say, like, part of my approach is just being me.
And practicing what you preach, because you have, I mean, you yourself, you adhere to quite a strict sort of daily routine, right? You do your sort of the performance habits that you preach is part of what you do, right?
Totally. Like, we have I do meditation already since probably 10 years ago. Like, of course, there have been moments that I have struggled with doing it or not, right? So it's been on and off at some points in my life, but this is something that I wanted to implement with my players, and it is not just because it works for me, but it's as well been proven scientifically, and then understanding as well that this might work for you, it might work for you, but maybe not for you, right? So just having this idea, being very flexible, but at the same time being willing to try these things, and then at the same time show that I am willing to do it myself. So the players, your coaches, are going to trust more what you are bringing to the table, because for them it's completely new. So I think preaching what you do is it's practicing what you preach it's very, very important.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think with like meditation as well, I think one of the things you see if you start looking into sort of high performance roles around the world, athletes, CEOs of companies, all of that, it seems to be a common thread that people seem to practice some kind of mindfulness techniques, whether that is pure meditation, if that's mindfulness, being aware of what you're doing, how you're acting, and that sort of stuff. Reflective practice, yoga too, absolutely. Reflective practice, I think, is one of the most impactful things you can do to improve as a person, right? Let alone at league or CS:GO or whatever. I think that's a very simple solution that people can probably go away and do today. Just half an hour, sit down, think about how it is you behave today, what you've done, and see where you can really improve. I think that's a really insightful piece into how you work and how Rogue work. I'd love to know whether or not you think that Rogue are unique in that. Do you think Rogue are doing things differently right now or not?
Different than other teams,
Yeah.
or different than?
Well, maybe both. Maybe that's a good topic in and of itself, right? Do you think you guys are standing out right now because of what you're doing on your own, or what?
I mean, this is the thing, like, and this is my, let's say, like, my way of seeing the world, and it's more in the direction that I don't like to do things that everyone wants to do or that people wants to hear. So maybe more like rogue.
Nice, I like that.
in that direction, it's I would say that we do us, right? So yes, I believe we do things particularly differently to other organizations, but I don't know what they're doing. I know a little bit what other orgs are doing, but I definitely would say, like, yes, we're ahead in many things just because we are bringing some science. We're bringing some support as well from the organization, being willing to really give some space to try things, giving the players the opportunity to have a different view of how esports is. Because I think, like, we've been coming a long way in esports about not trusting your organization, right? You will never know when they will tell you, okay, you are bench, someone else is coming, you're out. These things happen, right? Or things like not getting paid, or so it has built a lot in the direction that esports players and coaches, they start doubting like how genuine the organizations are with you. So with Rogue, it's they have a different approach. We have a different approach, and I have to say, this comes from the top, right? This comes from the management side, and they are willing to invest on this relationship with the players as well, and that's really, really important. You see it not that often in esports, but I feel like many teams are starting to take this approach and change a few things around that.
That's super interesting. So that's probably a good segue. So let's maybe talk about Rogue's performance this year then, right? I'm going to put you in the hot seat now. I'm going to hold you responsible for every good and bad move that's ever been done. So obviously that spring split, you guys didn't have the best performance in the world. You finished sort of mid-table. Summer split, you guys did pretty bloody well. And obviously, you then went on to Worlds, right? That's a second topic. What happened between, spring and summer? Was there a magical moment? What happened for you guys to kind of up the ante with your performance there?
There was a magical drink, like in Space Jam.
Nice. Nice.
No, yes, I mean, I think we got a spring split to test our approach. Like we made some changes in terms of how we wanted to approach the year. So something very interesting. We were doing some research in high performance environments, so from a holistic ecological approach, and that involves some interviews with the players, and it's something that Matt is involved in as well. And so these interviews give us so much understanding, so much knowledge about what players, coaches, how they see the organization, how they see the team. And then from there, it like just going through these and trying to understand what we want, what we need, what we could do, was implemented for summer split. So yes, we have some talks about the environment, about how we approach things, about how we approach reviews, for example, how we approach the routines that we have, and then reinforcing this commitment of the players in terms of this professionalism from players and coaches. So it was, yes, we took a very active role in terms of basically trying to have more deliberate practice and more efficient reviews and efficient practice. So yes, there were changes. There were things that players were willing to get into, because of course that was our chance to, okay, we want to go to Worlds, and this is one really good chance that we have. So we didn't want to burn it.
And it obviously worked. Do you know what I mean? You guys did fantastically as well. I mean, let's maybe talk about Worlds then, right? Because obviously this year it's been pretty different to any other year, right? Firstly, congratulations for getting to Worlds this year. That's a huge achievement in and of itself, right?
Thank you.
How was preparation for Worlds this year. What did that look like?
Yeah, I think everything started uh, December 2000. What was that? 19, right? That's how I look at it. Again, like I have mentioned, I think a few times already, we are values driven. We are routines driven approach. So we just continue doing these things for preparing for the world championship. So we the good thing is like, and this is the thing, like when you're winning, everything is great, no? So we were winning in summer split. We were very consistent, and then like of course you can argue that online what do you call this, online performance was an advantage for us or for Mad Lions, but in reality is that we like we tried to stick to the actions that we have every day, right? We didn't care if it was online or not, right? So we just continue as trying to be as consistent in our practice, and then that was reflected as well in during the year. And yes, some other teams didn't take that approach. So I think like this reinforcement from the whole year helped a lot for the preparation to Worlds. So part of that preparation was just trying to anticipate what was going to happen in during this quarantine period, which was 14 days, very, very tough 14 days. And then, of course, like it was a new experience for many of them, many of us. So we kind of start looking like what things we need in order to feel a little bit comfortable, right? To make us think that we are familiar with what we've been working all year long. So yeah, part of the preparation about how we're going to run this physical training that we were having twice a week, every single week of the year. How are we going to transfer it there? How do we manage the jet lag? How do we manage the lack of vitamins or lack of, or the mood swings that you could have during quarantine? So I base as well myself on all the studies. Well, it was more like lots of position papers from sports psychology organizations about like what are those recommendations for professional athletes to deal with quarantine. So it was more around this idea of preparing ourselves to the worst, basically. So more about like that idea of cognitive appraisal in terms of how do you perceive things. And even that it was tough. I wouldn't say that we got it everything perfect.
I guess maybe it's important to say, if anyone's listening, that what you're talking about is that your team did so well in the summer competition to eventually qualify for the World Championship that was in Shanghai, China.
Mm-hmm.
And your team was required to have 2 weeks of quarantine in a hotel complex with all the other teams, but every member of the team was alone in a room for that 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And the limitation, you weren't allowed out at any point?
No.
Or, okay.
So from the moment we took the flight from Europe to China, so we have to be restricted from, all the recommendations about health and the security. So we have to do lots of COVID tests. And then when we arrived to China, so we had this hotel where all the other pro players from the different teams were staying during this 2 weeks period. And then you were just assigned to one room, big enough. The players had their own PCs. Some of the players had a stationary bicycle, and then lots of kind of snacks, food. And then you weren't able to go outside. Some of them have balconies, some others didn't have balconies, but you couldn't even use it. And then, you get food 3 times a day, sorry.
3 times a week.
That would be tough. That would be tough.
Really tough.
That would be tough. Yeah. So yeah, that's how it looked during that period. So definitely there are lots of things that you have to cope with.
Absolutely. And also I think recently in sports psychology circles, at least, the idea of practitioner self-care has been a bit of a big topic. And so looking after yourself as a practitioner, because how are you supposed to look after the well-being of someone else if you're yourself struggling? But for you as a performance coach, sports psychologist for Rogue, did you feel the pressure to sort of help them, but also that the isolation was challenging for you too? Was that a difficult balancing act?
That's such a nice point, because I was thinking when we're talking about the being genuine and just showing who you really are, I think it's so crucial just to recognize when you are not fine, right? Just to recognize that you're a human being, and that applies as well for the players. So for me, of course I try to get myself like healthy enough to try to do the routines that I have in order to minimize stress in terms to be mentally healthy and physically healthy. Because yes, you have the pressure of, okay, we know that there will be lots of issues in terms of you are in this room, and then I mean just having the isolation in itself, it could be fine, right? But then for us and for all those professional players, we have to still practicing and competing against the other teams from the other regions, and then you are expected to perform, and at the same time just being in that room. So that in itself is already a challenge for everyone. So it got a point that yes, like I had to deal with myself 2 days in terms of like, okay, just trying to center myself, trying to reflect, trying to understand my own emotions and my own, like, what is happening, right? To be able to move on a little bit and then help the players to understand this is completely normal what is happening. Because of course they were like, in esports you have to review the games, you have to communicate a lot with each other. So there are some good points, there are not that good points, and then how you say things, it will matter, right? So we go in terms of communication. And then we were like reviewing, practicing over Discord, right, over like the camera, and in this way. So of course it's going to affect how you say things or how things are going to be perceived, and then this is affecting a lot the environment, and all, like, you can tell like emotions are all over the place. So yeah, but at the same time this was supposed to happen. So I think anticipating these things, and sometimes you cannot anticipate everything, right? But understanding that there might things that you are not expecting, so you might be willing to deal with them better.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, dude. I mean, I think it's fair to say most esports pros are pretty used to being indoors for 12 hours a day, right? But it's a different story when you get told you can't leave a hotel room at all. You can't even use a balcony. Like that's rough, man. Like, is there any sort of techniques, maybe mindfulness or from like somewhere else that you use to sort of stay calm in that situation? Because I'd be freaking out if I was you.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the idea, like, of course, gamers are used to just being in the rooms, right? But then just having this idea that I cannot leave.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
and I'm being 3 times a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got ration yourself as well, yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, part of those routines that we implemented was physical activity. So I was running physical training over the chat, over the video call. So that was funny, and as well for players to get used to that. So just like for players to get used to turning on their cameras is already a tough situation. Then we implemented meditation already since the beginning of the year, and some of the players were more consistent than others, and then some of these players were able to do it without me telling them. But then, because I understood that we are in an environment where we might forget how to follow our routine, so I created a group chat where it was only allocated for the group meditation, right? So we tried out for a bit, it worked a little bit, but then it was not useful because they were doing it already on their own. So we implemented this a lot, and as well another routine that helped them to reflect and to try to calm and try to manage or regulate more their physiology was just breathing exercises that we've been doing all year long. So yes, so that's what I said. Like this preparation has been already since the beginning of the year, because we just continue with these things. At some point, we had to stop the physical training just because people weren't eating very well. So the food was not mm, great at some point because you are eating very similar things for 2 weeks. So if people are not eating well, and then we're doing physical training, so of course you are going to um, decompensate. I think that's how you say it. So we have to go more in the direction of playing uh, another different game together as a team. So at the time it was very it was this game called Among Us. It was just like very strong among the gamers, the esports people. So we're playing Among Us as a team. So that was really fun. So I think many of the other teams from Europe or from NA were saying like, well, that saved the worlds just because.
Good timing.
Among Us, you've heard it first. Among Us saved worlds this year.
Yes,
That's fantastic. So look, dude, I've just got a couple of random questions that we've sort of been coming up with over the week to finish up. Matt, did you have anything else, any other topics that you want to sort of cover before we move on to the final bit?
I think the final questions do link in kind of nicely to this, because we've spoken so far about how to sort of keep people on the level, right? So get people to a level where they can play well. But if we now, I think that the rest of the questions focusing on sort of esports performance, but if we sort of assume now that everything in a player's life is pretty to a pretty good level. So let's say that they are eating well, they are sleeping well, they are physically active. What should they be doing to sort of reach the higher level of performance? Because I suppose there are still some pockets of thought, I suppose, that just simply more playing will get you to the higher level, or yeah, I guess that's I suppose that's one sort of school of thought. It's to simply, hammer out 10, 12, 14 hours of gaming per day. But if everything in your life is well, you have a high level of well-being, what would you recommend? What would you like to see a player doing ideally to sort of increase their game performance?
I would say just to be consistent and all these things. I feel like we're not at that level though, that everything is perfect in terms of how we are optimizing the resources. I think some of the resources are there, but they are not very well optimized. So it is like, for example, you teach a player a mental skill, like let's say mental imagery or motor imagery or visualization, and they try it once. Great, they had a good experience, but then you don't continue doing it, so you are not going to get absolutely nothing from it, but it was just an acute effect, right? So I would say like just being consistent at having this very integral approach in terms of the performance habits or the performance approaches, the performance sources or resources that a team is giving you. I think just to start to the thing, what I feel the thing is that many of the players, let's say all players, they have learned many things and they have learned it not in the right direction, not in a good way. So they have to go back and try to relearn things, but they need to be open about it. And for the new players, they need to really try to, I think, like to be ambitious enough to try the best to learn, but not meaning that you have to play for 15 hours a day. I think that this idea, it's an old-fashioned idea already, and that the more you play, the better you get. And we have seen many examples, like for example, in G2, Wunder, like he's well known for not playing that much solo queue, and he is still being able to play at very, very high level. Like, yes, for sure, he's an outlier, but I think we have already so many resources to help the players to understand that grinding is not the right approach just because we are not machines. So I think getting this idea about just being hungry to learn and just being consistent by doing what you're learning. I think it's key.
Dude, super interesting. So, just a couple of, I would say light-hearted questions, but they're really not, to round off the end of the podcast. Is there an ideal mindset for an esports player?
An ideal mindset. That's a tough one, because I think like whatever works for you is great. It's good. But I feel like, because I think like we are pushing a lot towards well-being, performance at the highest level while maintaining your well-being, and I think that's really important, right? I think that's crucial. You cannot really have a long career if you don't look after yourself. And this is all around, like, yes, the way how you see your professional career. So I think a right mindset is having a professional mindset, which means just to be able to be open to learn new things, just be open to understand your teammates in the way they are, because not everyone is the same, and then they need to understand this. And because they are young adults, so they will think that they have the world in their hands, and then there is only one approach to improve and to be the best. And I believe this is not true. There are different approaches, and that's why in performance psychology we have a toolbox. We have many different ways of approaching the same thing. And that's why I would say there is not only one characteristic, but I would say an umbrella in terms of this professionalism and this be open to everything. And I think Matt said it before, like, okay, if I'm the smartest one here, I'm in the wrong place or something like that. So,
Absolutely.
so it is not about that. It's just like about like you can always learn. You can always get better by just being very open to new experiences. I think that's something to consider. Yeah.
It's actually an incorrect answer though. The correct mentality is an Isma mindset.
We're calling that today. Yeah, nice. So look, last question then, and I don't know why we end on these crazy hard questions. We should really like questions like, what's your favorite color? But right now,
I love car questions. Let's get more philosophical.
Good, absolutely. So look, obviously, you know, over the past few years and stuff, we've obviously seen a huge uptick in teams like bringing on board sports psychologists, performance coaches, right? How do you see the evolution of that role over the next few years? Do you see it becoming as important as that sort of coach role, and has sort of improved over the past few years, or not?
The role of performance coach, sports psychologist. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think yes. I think it's very important. I think it's bringing different perspective to the coaching staff, who is generally talking former pro players or coaches who come from traditional sports with no background in esports. So you have those two kind of perspectives. And I think the performance coaches or the sports psychologists just give another perspective and just give different ideas. I think this role will continue evolving in the way that more people will be needed with different skills for different domains, for different disciplines. But I hope that is evolving in the right direction, and not in the direction that it is the only one factor to success or to succeed, or the only one factor for a successful team, because it is not like that. I feel like everyone is giving their part, but then sometimes and you can see it in traditional sports, or you can see it in esports already, performance coaches or sports psychologists think or say or make themselves like branded as like they are the one factor, and I would say this is the wrong perspective, and it will only damage our profession or our discipline to get more people with this background into esports.
Absolutely. Dude, this has been a fantastic podcast. I've really enjoyed, hearing everything you have to say. I think it's been inspirational. We will have all of Isma's social media linked down below. If you guys want to check it out, then go wild. Show him some love. Cheers, dude.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, I think be authentic, be consistent, but try new things.
Matt's been taking
Great.
notes. Nice.
So that's part of my Isma mentality going forward.
That's great. That's great, Matt.
Well,
Thanks
for your
for.
time. Yeah, that was really
Thanks,
interesting.
thanks for your
Yeah.
time today, dude. Cheers.